right, welcome to the second review and the first Shovel Knight review of the week. Um, Indeed, we are reviewing Shovel Knight King of Cards. And if you're a long-time listener of the show, you know we have quite a history with this franchise. I mean, because let's see, Shovel Knight was the very first review we did way back in what was it, 2013? No, it was 2014. I think that was like the only review we did with like the original cast, because by the time we had made reviews a regular thing, um, staff rotations happened, let's say, and in the years, ever since, we have subsequently reviewed every Shovel Knight campaign that has come out as part of that original adventure, now known as the Treasure Trove, and the original campaign is now called Shovel of Hope. And the Shovel Knight, this whole package has been in development for about 5 years, give or take. Whenever that came, the first thing came out and all that stuff. But what we're doing, what we're reviewing this week is the last bits to come out of that original Kickstarter campaign. Because if you remember, one of the stretch goals was 3 of the Order of No Quarter would get playable campaigns, and what was it, about a month ago, maybe a little less, the final campaign and another side game, we'll get to that.
Well, the side game was also a stretch goal.
Yeah,
the multiplayer versus mode.
Yes, we'll get to that in the next review, is what I'm saying. But King of Cards is the King Knight campaign, and it is the final. This and Showdown. These are the final parts of the Treasure Trove. After this, they're moving on to a standalone spin-off game called Shovel Knight Dig, which will not have a connection to the Treasure Trove. So, what Dig entails, we don't know yet. But getting to King of Cards, this is probably the biggest Shovel Knight campaign to date, just in terms of content and levels and all that stuff. A big part of that is because of this new side game called Joust. It is the titular card game. Well, actually, no, it's not titular. It's quasi-titular. The King of Cards
it's the cards that you're titularly trying to become king of.
Yeah, there we go. It's weird. But yeah, a big part of the premise, not the only one, is that King Knight is trying to become the King of Cards
because he wants to be the king of something, and he's not very good at that because he's an enormous man-child.
Yes, and that really comes to focus in the game. It's a big part of his character. And in terms of the timeline, King Knight's campaign comes first. This is before Spectre of Torment, this is before Shovel of Hope, and Plague of Shadows. Because if you played Spectre of Torment, King Knight was already a member of the Order of No Quarter when Spectre Knight was being recruited. So
I thought Spectre Knight recruited him.
Sort of.
He was already in charge of Pridemore.
Yeah, there we go. That but here's the thing. In this prequel, this details he becomes a member of the Order of No Quarter at the same time as becoming the King of Pridemore. It's explained in the game. Plus, this is Shovel Knight. How much does continuity really matter? The answer is not all that.
I don't know, Adam. I care about continuity in my silly kids games.
Well, it's like if you do care about that sort of thing, you're going to have a real problem with the Spectre Knight fight because he's using powers that he gets from the Spectre of Torment campaign, which he should not actually have when you fight him. But like I said, the people who probably care about that are really weird, like and write things for TV tropes. But anyway, now in terms of gameplay, Shovel Knight's campaign, let's see, it can best be described as playing like Wario Land, of all things.
Which I found to be quite delightful myself.
Yeah. I mean, not 100%, but your primary attack is the shoulder bash, which is,
they actually did. I found that Spectre of Torment kind of did this too. I didn't really find Plague of Shadows did. That the set of abilities you have really combine well together in creating a flowing experience. Although this one's is significantly less intuitive than I found Spectre of Torment initially.
I didn't really have a problem with King Knight's playstyle. Mainly,
well, no, it's mostly just you have to think of things as shoulder bash targets and not just platforms to land on a lot of the time.
Well, it's also
you shoulder bash and then you get a little bit of height and you go into a spin and then you can land on things and bounce off them with the spin.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the gameplay really differs from Wario Land because of the spin aspect. And yeah, you do have to incorporate spin into your gameplay stylings. Also worth noting, the health meter. So Shovel Knight, King of Cards uses a really different health subset than the others. That is to say, hearts, like your more traditional video game hearts, as opposed to the orb in the other campaigns. And there's actually a trade-off here because you actually do encounter hearts. Like if you shoulder bash enemies, hearts will come out. Like it's much easier to refill your health meter. The trade-off,
well, especially since when you bash into things, like a significant proportion of the time they drop hearts.
Right, and the reason for that is because on the whole, King Knight actually has less health than any of the other characters. I think his heart.
Hey, if you eat all of your mom's steak, you can get up to 8 hearts, I think.
I think that's actually about 10, if I'm remembering correctly.
Maybe you can get a good number.
Yeah.
Oh yes, but King Knight doesn't do half pips.
Yes.
That's what you meant. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like you lose a heart, you lose a heart. Yeah, it's like in terms of gameplay styling, it's probably not to everyone's, but I found, I thought this was better than Plague Knight or Spectre Knight.
I have to agree.
I mean, I liked Spectre Knight's gameplay style. It's just there were little things that made it less than the sum of its parts. Like you could overshoot your scythe, your scythe cutting, which happened to me with way more frequency than it should have. But also once again, like I said, I'm a fan of the slower Wario Land play style. So it clicked well with me. I know Gollix doesn't agree fully, but
oh no, I enjoyed this a lot. I just found it took more getting used to.
Right. I definitely agree that it's less intuitive than say Shovel Knight, but it's not all that complicated once you get things rolling, because it's really just two components of dash and spin. It's definitely more intuitive than fucking Plague Knight and his parabolic arcs. They never did click well with me. Let's see. Another significant change is the levels themselves. it's the inverse of everything else you've encountered in Shovel Knight. That is to say, instead of very long levels, like each area's been split up into like 2 or 3 parts. They're a lot shorter. But the trade-off there is now it's much more Mario 3 like, ironically enough, because there are secret exits. You know, you could also use Super Mario World here, but there are now alternate paths in a level.
Mm-hmm.
And also boss encounters have been largely moved out of the levels. Not entirely. You'll still get the occasional boss encounter in the levels, but like fighting the other members of the Order of No Quarter, that takes place on the map now.
Yeah, they're all wanderers, like the...
Right. You know, the only exception is like the first encounter with Spectre Knight, which happens at the Lich Yard. In fact, this game explains how the Lich Yard became the place it was in Shovel of Hope. Yeah. Anyway. So, yeah, a lot has been changed up for this iteration of Shovel Knight. And like I said, the meatiest edition, but also the most, not superfluous, but most optional, is the Joust.
Sort of optional? I mean, you get a lot of the merit medals that you use to buy all of your accessories and stuff from playing Joustus. And it's kind of the point of the game.
You're talking about the accessories here. Well, this time around they're called Heirlooms.
Yeah.
They do the typical Shovel Knight thing of augmenting your power set. Yep. Whoa.
Adam, yours sounds a little janky. Just give me a second. Give it a second.
Okay. Yeah, it's like probably the most useful of the bunch is the, let's call it the Super Dash.
Yeah.
You know,
I just got that, and it's really convenient for... It lets you... I mean, it's tricky to launch off a Super Dash in the air. I'm not sure if you even can. But it lets you, like, dash pretty much as far as you want, including over open things and over water.
You know, once, like, a Shovel Knight artifact being overpowered? Perish the thought.
I think every campaign has had at least one.
Yeah.
Probably. But I suppose second from the top is the Flame Sword.
Which is the most straightforward offensive attack. I mean, you also get like a flappy glove that's very short ranged and a
I didn't really care for that one because it's too short.
Yeah, I mean, its only selling point really is that it's fast, which would allegedly make it good against large, slow things, I guess. And the what's it called?
Yeah.
You also get like shoot the if you've played Shovel Knight, you know the little chest knight dudes with the lances. You get to shoot those and they go through in the air. Plus, King Knight is a great friend of rats, so you get rats with bombs on them that you can like throw out and then whistle to make them turn around if you don't want them to go the way they're going. And don't worry, the rats have a safety harness, so they do not get harmed by the bombs.
Other things, not so much. No. Let's see. Another really useful heirloom is the Bubble Frog, which allows you to float.
That thing was a lifesaver.
Literally. Like, I used that in a couple of places, let me tell you.
Yeah, because if you dash and bounce the wrong way, you can definitely end up like with not much of a choice to do aside from fall to your doom.
Yeah. Like I said, overall, King Knight has a good set of heirlooms. Other like the Turncoat, which is basically a not a reflect shield, but it's if a projectile comes to you, you will not take damage, and you will send your own energy blast towards the opponent, and that stuff does stack. Like the more powerful the beam, the more powerful the counterattack will be. Let's see. I think among the most useless was the secret heirloom, which is actually King Knight's signature, the Horns of Heralding.
Those are considered secret?
Well, in the sense that you don't buy it from a chest, you don't get it from a level.
I guess. Well, it would be hard to design a level for those because they're the thing from King Knight's boss fight where he like summons horns on the sides of the screen that blow out confetti that damages things.
Yeah. It's kind of like King Knight himself, which I guess is the point.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, King Knight is a weirdo, and yeah.
Yeah.
He likes to dress like a king, but he lives at home with his mom, and he's friends with the rats.
Right. Well, I mean, this is telling his rise to power.
Right. I mean, it's not like he would have matured much by the time you actually play as him.
No, but the game makes it very clear that his man-childness doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a foregone conclusion because, well, there is only one way this can end up because it's a prequel to everything.
Right. This is how he got to be,
the King of Pridemore.
Well, the guy sitting in Pridemore Castle that everybody listens to mostly.
Well, the usurper, if you will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
he doesn't get a ton of respect even then, it feels like.
Yeah. Anyway, so getting to Joust itself, it's a fully featured card game, in the vein of, say, Triple Triad, and
Triple Triad.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing that, or I'm trying to remember the name of the card game in Knights of the Old Republic. It's one of these.
Attack, I want to say.
I'm like, I'd have to look it up, but it's definitely got.
Well, one of the things for this is that while early on you're playing on 2x2 grids or 3x3 grids,
Mm-hmm.
The size of the grid is actually one of the variables in the game.
Yes.
And the cards don't have anything like numbers on them. They just have arrows. Because
these aren't attack cards necessarily.
Yeah, the gameplay with the cards is bumping them around.
Yeah. It's actually pretty unique. Like, I can't think of another card game that does an indirect sort of game. But, here we are. Like, the goal of the game is to secure the 3 gems on the field.
Well, all of the gems on the field, which is not more than 3, I don't think, usually.
No, it is. I didn't see a game where it was more than 3.
It is less than 3 on some of them.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the more gems you have, the better. Like, you don't have to do what they call a gem sweep to win. It's just if you do get a gem sweep, you get a bonus.
3 of your opponent's cards instead of just 1.
Yeah, and it's like
spoilers. Your opponents have better cards than you most of the time.
Yeah,
and that's the best way of getting more cards.
Right. Awesome. Like, you can find some really good cards out of the card games.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But buying them, you're not going to get that much.
Well, it's not so much buying as, like, some of the best cards are in the levels.
In treasure chests or whatever, yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the cards function like this. Like, you can't place a card directly on the gems. You have to push them there via the arrows.
Which,
like the arrows...
if the only legal play is to push your opponent's gem into a thing, you have to do that.
Right. And under normal circumstances, if there's an arrow pointing in the opposite direction, you can't push that way.
But that's what double arrows are for.
Yes.
Yep.
I will say, one thing that frustrated me is like they don't make what the advanced cards do immediately apparent.
Yeah, you have to look at them while you're building your deck to really see what they do generally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another good. Also worth noting is as you advance in the playhouses, there will be different arenas. Like the second Joust's house deals with these craters, I guess.
Well, there are rocks on the field.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the cards you get there have
bombs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which blow up rocks.
Yeah. And the third Joust's house deals with traps. That is to say, pits open up, and any card that goes there gets shunted off the field and back into the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I found that the enemy AI had a real problem with those. It was kind of the easiest of the houses, if I'm being honest, where those battles had those. Like, and you also have the boss encounters, which will add a new wrinkle because the bosses have powers. Like the boss first house is the Black Knight. Yeah. By the way, this is also the only Shovel Knight campaign where the Black Knight isn't a boss encounter in the traditional sense. Like you don't fight him, you battle him.
Yeah, you play cards with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he has a power called Meteor Strike, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll blow up 3 cards in a row.
Yeah.
He'll blow up one row. I think he can also do one column.
Yeah, one column. Yeah.
Now, you King Knight have your own powers called cheats.
Yeah, against normal players, I felt kind of bad about using cheats, but the bosses are going to cheat too, so.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
I didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, if they can have power, so can I.
Well, I mean, I used Gem Thief in regular matches because I'm like, fuck it.
Yeah, if you don't want to bother beating people fairly, which is totally in character.
Yeah. Yeah, King Knight totally would do this.
Yeah.
He would.
Yeah. I mean,
I think there are only the 3 kinds of cheats. There's one that lets you play every card in your hand if you want to, and you always have 3 cards in hand. There's one that lets you that just changes all of your opponent's cards in hand to shitty cards that only have 1 arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's the Gem Thief one, which is the one that like literally just goes, did you want to win the game?
Yeah.
It turns every card that has a gem on it to yours.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just have to nail down the timing, and like that's the win card.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, like if you're bad at this game, I won't say I was amazing, but the AI definitely gets harder. And like I said,
also honestly, the game, because you can't win by doing the direct thing,
right?
You have to be good at playing like a couple moves ahead, and I'm bad at that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really care because honestly, I know this is a subjective thing, but side game card bollocks never was my thing. Like, I'm one of the people who didn't think Triple Triad was the best part of Final Fantasy VIII, for example.
Neither did I. I didn't care. I usually don't care much for side mini games unless I actually enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, I know Triple Triad has its fans, its very, very dedicated fans, just not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
It's like most of Joustus you don't have to play. Though it is pretty involved for a side game of this magnitude. Like, it's not Triple Triad levels, but it's more involved than you might think.
Mm-hmm.
and definitely less involved than, say, something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon the card game or Magic the Gathering. Yeah.
Not that that should be shocking.
Yeah. I mean, like, in this card game, you don't really have to worry about RNG. If only
Aside
because
from the RNG of what cards from your deck you actually get.
right, like there's a lot less RNG than your typical card game because, well, you don't have to have the bigger number winning. It's not that kind of card game.
Right.
But it's like, I mean, RNG is always going to exist in a card game because
unless you have access to all of your cards all the time.
Right.
Which is called a questionable gameplay decision usually.
Right. I mean, here's the thing: like Triple Triad had that to a certain extent until the random rule got introduced. But like, you could actually pick your cards. So if you had really powerful cards, you could pick them all the fucking time. Let's just say Final Fantasy VIII wasn't the most well thought out of the Final Fantasies.
What? Final Fantasy VIII? Unbalanced mechanics?
I know, right? But yeah, if you like this kind of thing, Joustus will provide several hours of play, especially if you're trying to do it the honest way and if you're 100%ing. Because, not surprisingly, outside of the Joustus house, there's a whole bunch of boss encounters. Like the secret boss encounter is related to Joustus. Didn't bother to do that personally because, well, once again.
Also, spoilers. Pretty much everybody you get to come back to your ship, you can play Joustus with again if you didn't already.
Yes.
I think Mona is one of the few exceptions, and that's because she is,
she's a
total nerd.
Well, she's also the boss of the second Joustus house. So
right, but she's also the kind of person who just sits in the background and reads books.
Well, yeah. Also the third Joustus house boss will go into the background.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Mona's. I haven't gotten past the second world, quote unquote, yet. So.
Right. Yeah. So all in all, this adds up to a very lengthy campaign. Like I said, I think overall this is the biggest. Granted, adding a completely new side game to the mix kind of skews it in your favor. But the campaign itself will last you a good long while as well.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of graphics, in terms of sound,
it's Shovel Knight.
Yeah, it's Shovel Knight. It's like
King Knight's sprite required, I think, less editing for the playable version than Spectre Knights did. Well, maybe around the same amount as Plague Knights.
Well, like they didn't update his portrait, unlike Spectre Knight.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's like this is still using a lot of the graphical assets, a lot of the same music. Shovel Knight score is excellent, one of Jake Kaufman's best.
Indeed.
It's like I'm trying to think if they added anything new in terms of sound. I mean, there are new graphics, obviously, and not just Joustus. Like the rat rings are new. It's like, there's a new final boss and all that kind of deal. But, it's like, not unexpectedly, this looks and sounds like the other Shovel Knight campaigns. I'm not
as
sure if
it should, seeing as how at least to some extent it is in fact the same thing.
Yeah. Let me see here. Now, in terms of pricing, this is where things get interesting because starting with Spectre of Torment, each Shovel Knight campaign has been offered as a standalone affair. This is also why we are reviewing Showdown separately, because it is its own thing. And oddly enough, Plague of Shadows is still only part of the treasure trove. It's the only one you can't get separately. I don't know why, but this isn't about that campaign. This is about King of Cards. Now, standalone, this clocks in at $9.99, which is the typical price for a Shovel Knight expansion.
Mm-hmm. And it's absolutely worth that.
Yes. Also worth noting, it is part of the treasure trove, and if you already had the treasure trove, you got this for free. Honestly, it was probably best if you got the original Shovel Knight back 5 years ago.
Before they increased the price of the treasure trove to above 25 or something.
Oh no, it went up significantly with the 2 expansions.
Right. No, initially it was like 25.
Right, because the Shovel Knight treasure trove is now clocking in at $40. I'm like,
the price of all of the things put together.
Right. Maybe still a little cheaper. Actually, it's still cheaper than to buy all this individually because Shovel of Hope. Yeah, Shovel of Hope by itself is $14.99. Like, though if you're going to get all of the Shovel Knight, obviously get the treasure trove. And I think the soundtrack collection is also part of the treasure trove. It should be. Anyway, as far as is it worth getting the treasure trove? Yes, obviously. It's definitely above a 3-second thinking about it purchase at this point because it's $40. That's putting it in the that's you get a shit ton of content here, but that's pretty high for an indie title. I understand where that price comes from these days, but it's like is it worth buying the treasure trove? Obviously. Given what you have in here, and this will be the same for our other Shovel Knight review as well. But it's like buying the treasure trove. Even at $40 is worth it. It's like you get a ton of content. All of the main campaigns are excellent. As far as Showdown, well, you have to stay tuned because I think we're all done with talking about King of Cards. King of Cards. Excellent addition to the Shovel Knight pantheon. The Shovel Knight.
Indeed.
So, coming up after the break, we will be reviewing the multiplayer component, which is its own standalone expansion, Shovel Knight Showdown.